Good morning, everyone. It's 11 a.m. We're going to go ahead and start our virtual town hall. This is the first that Reform California is conducting in an era of coronavirus. It's just the new normal of how we're going to have to engage in politics for at least for the foreseeable future if we're going to be successful in stopping the massive tax increases in the state of California. And that is the basis of our first town hall. As many of you know, Proposition 13 in 1978 was a historic landmark citizens' revolt against higher taxes in our state. And as a result of the Prop 13, we've seen limitations on property tax increases in our state for the last 42 years. Politicians are trying to repeal Prop 13 with a very deceptive ballot measure that they've placed on the ballot in November. And it would impose a massive property tax hike in the state at a time when we can least afford it with the coronavirus disruptions to our economy. A couple housekeeping items. If you would like to ask questions, we will take questions at the end of the presentation. If you're in the Zoom app, all you have to do is raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask your question at the end of the presentation. If you're on a phone, all you have to do is hit *9 to raise your hand at the end of the presentation, and we will call on you once we get that. Also, if your question is not answered, just email it to us. We will be responding to emails throughout the day. The email address is carl@reformcalifornia.org. So with that, let's get started. Many of you know about Reform California. This is the organization that led the gas tax repeal in 2018, successfully recalled a state senator, Senator Josh Newman, from office because he was the deciding vote on the gas and car tax hikes. But Reform California has been around since 2004, and we've successfully defeated over $3 billion in tax increases since that time. It's a 527 political action committee. Many people know what a PAC is, but we're a little different. Ours is focused on California and looks at opposing tax increases because we believe that we already pay enough in taxes. To do that, we expose government waste because the money we already give politicians is not being efficiently used. And we want to see government improved. And that's why we support reform-minded candidates and ballot measures for office each election. We're different than most other PACs in two respects. First, we're not backed by any big contributors. All of our support comes from grassroots contributors, supporters who give an average of $37. And that adds up to our political action committee's war chest to fund all of our programs. We are entirely grassroots funded with tens of thousands of contributors. And more importantly than anything else, we're willing to take on the fights that career politicians run from. Even Republican establishment politicians are sometimes refusing or unwilling to stand up and lead the fight against bad policies. That's where Reform California's role is so important, that we are the conscience and sometimes the agitators to force the fights that need to be pursued. I can tell you right now that when we started the recall of Josh Newman in 2017, obviously Democrats opposed it, but many Republican establishment politicians opposed it too. Same thing with the gas tax repeal. We got no help from the Republican Party in California. We had to fight and get this entire movement going before they even saw a benefit in it. So it's important that we have groups like Reform California to carry out fights because sometimes our political system will pay lip service but not really take the lead and take action to oppose bad policy. We have four major programs that we're pursuing in 2020. First, obviously, is blocking tax hikes. And that's where Reform California is unique in that we are a permanent campaign that fights state tax increases as well as local tax increases. Our two major areas of focus in this project will be to protect Prop 13 by defeating what's called the split roll initiative, and we'll be talking about that in this town hall. But we also organize opposition to local tax hikes. And this is so important because typically the statewide tax increases have coalitions that organize to oppose them. But many times it's the local tax increases that get put on the ballot. And there's virtually no local group that's willing to step forward and fund and organize the opposition. We do that in many cases with a lot of coalition partners, most notably the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. But we need to make sure that groups are engaged on local tax hikes because that's where a lot of the big tax increases actually are imposed. So a permanent campaign to block tax increases at both the state and local level is our first area of priority at Reform California. Second, you know, you could have all the great candidates and good ideas running for office, but it's clear that we don't have election integrity. And that's why we want to do two things. First, audit the voter rolls of every county to make sure that only eligible citizens are registered to vote. We want every legal vote to be cast and every legal vote to be counted. And that's why voter integrity, voter roll integrity is so important. And this does not require statewide action. You can get the local county board of supervisors to order an audit of the voter rolls of every county. And any sort of evidence that emerges of ineligible voters can be used as the basis of challenges in court to force a statewide cleansing process and perhaps even the termination of the motor voter program until it's improved. We also are fighting to ensure honest titles and summaries on every ballot initiative. This is something that hurt our Prop 6 campaign in 2018. They changed the title on the ballot, so it no longer referenced a gas tax repeal. They literally deprived Californians of an honest election. And they're doing it again with this split roll initiative, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Third, we do need to get better elected officials at both the state and local levels. That's why we are recruiting reform leaders at both the state and local level of government to run for office. And this year, we've taken the opportunity to focus on 12 key legislative races that we're going to support reform-minded candidates, hopefully helping them get elected to office in 12 target legislative races. Now, there will be other races that we play in at the local level, but these are races for both Congress as well as races for state assembly and state senate. Fourth, we're hoping to mobilize and inform voters, and the programs we have going on in this area are perhaps the most important programs we have at Reform California. First, it is clear that we've lost a grassroots infrastructure in the state of California. The Democrats and the liberals have the labor unions, have various groups funded by billionaires, and they go out and they recruit these grassroots activists that are really the lifeblood of their campaigns. We have to do the same thing on the center right of the political spectrum. And Reform California, its success to this point has been because we have engaged in grassroots organizing for the recall of Josh Newman and the qualification of the gas tax repeal. And we're continuing to build out that grassroots database and networks in each region, and we're doing it issue by issue. And so you'll see us engaging not only on gas tax repeal, but the repeal of sanctuary state, also the repeal of AB 5. This is the new law that bans, in essence, independent contractors in California. So our grassroots database is designed to activate individuals on the issues that they care about the most and that have the broadest appeal in each of those areas. We also continue to do our policy research, our watchdog reports, and outreach to the media with press conferences and advisories. And we continue to expand the use of our voter guide in endorsing candidates and taking positions on ballot measures. So those are the four major programs at Reform California that we have underway. I would encourage you to check out the website at Reform California. It is at reformcalifornia.org, and you can take a look at more details on each of the initiatives and projects that I just referenced. Let's talk about Prop 13. And there you got one of those grassroots left-wing activists, a famous picture of someone getting triggered. Basically, they have a fixation with Prop 13 on the left. It is hated by California politicians, frankly, from both political parties at times, and of course, liberals. They have always tried to repeal Prop 13 since 1978. They've never given up trying to repeal Prop 13. It's been 42 years, and every time they go and try to repeal it, thank goodness voters are smart enough and we push back. This year, I would argue, is the most dangerous threat to Prop 13 we've seen ever, because the state of California is so blue, and because the Republican Party is in such a state of turmoil and shambles, frankly, and because we don't have aggressive leadership on the right, Democrats and liberals see their best opportunity to repeal Prop 13. And they also have learned a trick with the Prop 6 campaign, that they can change the title and summary on initiatives and confuse voters and frankly deceive voters into voting for things that they don't particularly like. And so it's so important that we understand that this November represents the greatest threat to Prop 13 we've ever seen in 42 years. What does Prop 13 do? It simply provides you with protection. It's a sustainable and reasonable limitation on the rate of growth of property taxes, 2% annually. And of course, it allows for a reset when a property is sold to reflect the current market value. Prop 13 protects millions of California homeowners, retirees, working families. If it goes away, they literally will return to an environment like we saw in the 1970s, where property tax increases could go up so quickly that individuals, retirees, working families are literally priced out of the home that they own. But they have to sell their home because they can no longer afford it because the property tax went up so quickly. And by the way, Prop 13 does not starve government. It provides a reasonable increase in tax revenues. And when adjusted for inflation, California property tax revenues are still generating more revenue by a substantial amount than we saw in 1978. Mainly because the value of properties have gone up so quickly in California. In some jurisdictions, adjusted for inflation, we see Prop 13 providing about 400% more revenue for those jurisdictions than they received in 1978, even adjusted for inflation. Don't tell me that you can't live on 400% more revenue than you did in 1978, adjusted for inflation. The reality is this. The bottom line is this. California politicians will never stop trying to raise our taxes, ever, no matter how much money we give them. They will never stop raising taxes because there will never be enough money to satisfy their spending addiction. That is the reality we're dealing with. No debate, no facts, no figures, no charts, no argument will ever change the fundamental problem we have in California, that the politicians will never consider it enough money when it comes to taxes. Now, what does split roll do? And I'm going to use the word split roll only once, because I do not believe that split roll is the right title for what we're up against. But the split roll initiative on the ballot in November would repeal all of the Prop 13 protections for commercial properties. And that would be any office space, any retail stores, restaurants, gas stations, everywhere we go to work and buy products and get services, they would see an immediate property tax increase. Industrial properties, where we create a lot of jobs, would be seeing a property tax increase immediately. Residential. Now, you're going to hear that the initiative on the ballot in November, quote, exempts single-family homes as well as apartment buildings. That is only partially true. The reality is many of our new residential properties now have mixed-use requirements in the state. So they do have commercial space, stores. It's the live, work, play model that local governments and the state governments have embraced, which means that, yes, this initiative on the ballot does impact the living costs, the rents, and in some cases, the home costs for individuals by imposing increased property taxes on the commercial or industrial or the commercial or retail pieces of those mixed use projects. Bottom line, the ballot measure in November is a gut of Prop 13 and a massive imposition of a property tax, which will increase taxes by $13 billion in the next year alone. Here are some tips for talking about Prop 13 and the effort in November to repeal it. First, what is it? Language matters. Don't say split roll. That's for policy geeks. Split roll is that you're going to get rid of Prop 13 for some properties and keep it for others. Look, the backers of the repeal don't call it split roll. They call it the Schools and Communities First Initiative. And guess what? The title that they got on their ballot measure downplays the notion of a tax increase. It talks about improving schools, improving public services and community services. The better name for this initiative and what we should call it when we talk about it with our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues, this initiative is a repeal of Prop 13. It's a massive blank check tax increase. Words matter, language matters. It's a repeal of Prop 13, a massive blank check tax increase. Who's backing it? State politicians and special interests. In particular, the government union bosses who want pay hikes and pension spikes and larger government. Why should we oppose it? Two key message points. First, the cost of living in California is already too damn high. The gas is too expensive, rent is too expensive, taxes are too high. The cost of everything is too expensive in California. This initiative would impose a massive increase in our cost of living. Why? For no good reason. Government already has enough money and they're wasting it. So those are the two key message points when talking about this initiative. Cost of living goes up and government's going to waste the money. And you can provide whatever example you'd like. And this is where Reform California's research is so important, is that we generate the examples of waste, fraud, and abuse in government programs that you can just reference to people. The most important question people are going to ask is, how much is this going to cost me? If this tax increase goes into effect, how much will it cost the average Californian? Well, I would say that the important thing to do is to start out by talking about the overall benefit of Prop 13 to the average Californian. Let them know about $13,700. And that's an eye-catching number, right? $13,700. What's that? That is the average amount saved for the typical homeowner in 2018 alone. Let me repeat that. Because Prop 13 was enacted in 1978, because we live in a world where we have a Prop 13 that's in place in the state constitution, the average annual amount saved for the typical homeowner is about $13,700. That's based on what would the rate of increase of property taxes have been on the typical parcel or home in California over the same period of time in terms of increased property taxes. Take a look at that, what that might do to someone's mortgage. More than $1,000 per month, $1,300 per month in increased cost of living. $4,400. This is the average amount saved for the typical renter in 2018. Again, this takes the average apartment building and breaks down the cost of increased property taxes if Prop 13 were eliminated. And then finally, TBD, to be determined. We really don't have a good number here, but we know it's high. And that is the increased cost of living on all products and services in California if we have increased property taxes on retail, office space, commercial, manufacturing, industrial properties. When you go into Starbucks, get a coffee, it's going to be more expensive if the split roll initiative is passed in November, because their property tax is going to be higher. Restaurants are going to have to charge more money. Restaurants are already hurting because of coronavirus, and they're going to have another increase that they have to deal with in terms of cost of living. And that leads me to a good point. The coronavirus, how does it impact the 2020 election cycle, particularly the effort that the state politicians have to gut Prop 13? Well, first, you might think it makes our case easier because people are hurting. Nobody wants to pay more in taxes. No one wants a higher cost of living when we've got, according to this morning's LA Times, half of Los Angeles residents out of work, and seeing unemployment skyrocket and small businesses shutting their doors permanently in some cases. You'd think that makes our case easier. In some part, it does. But the coronavirus is only going to motivate state politicians and local politicians to raise taxes because they serve at the pleasure of the government union boss. They need to make sure that they don't cut any government staff positions. They need to make sure that they don't cut any government programs. And so they are going to look for every way to increase taxes. And they're going to say, but the children, if we don't get the tax increase, we'll have to shut the libraries and shut the schools and not do road repairs. All that will be on display. And if you say, oh, they're really not going to do a tax increase. I'm sorry, I lived through it. In 2010 in San Diego during the Great Recession, local politicians like Todd Gloria, the government unions, even some of the Republicans, the Chamber of Commerce, they got together and they said, let's raise the sales tax. That's in 2010 during the Great Recession, when people could ill afford it then. Coronavirus is only going to make tax increases more attractive to state and local politicians. And who do they, they don't care as long as it gets snookered through the ballot process, as long as they're able to sneak it through, they get to say, well, the voters approved it. So it actually makes our environment a little more risky because I can see more and more local and state tax increases being placed on the ballot, all in the name of a temporary tax increase on the rich to get through the coronavirus turmoil. It also makes our campaign harder. It makes it harder for us to raise money. As a grassroots organization, we well understand that small business owners and working families in California that we rely on in Reform California to wage our campaigns, it's harder for them to contribute because they themselves are seeing tougher times. It also is harder to do our grassroots organizing. And that's why we've been spending a lot of time thinking about how do we embrace technology? How do we use social media to organize our campaign, even during the downtime of the coronavirus? We got some ideas on that front, but the coronavirus definitely has a big impact on the fight to roll back Prop 13, to defend Prop 13, and to stop tax increases. So here's our campaign strategy. We know that large stakeholders on both sides, the government unions, and of course, property owners of commercial and retail and industrial properties, they are already geared up to run, a very large campaign, but they'll do what they always do. They're going to rely on TV and direct mail. And this is where, if you just let the campaign play out with large stakeholders funding TV and direct mail, it's likely that we're going to have a tax increase. By the way, those large stakeholders also don't fight all tax increases. So for example, the large stakeholders in 2018, they didn't help us with the gas tax repeal. They cut deals with Governor Jerry Brown and the Democrats in the legislature. And those deals basically made it more attractive for them to sit on the sideline. We cannot trust large stakeholders to run an effective campaign to defend Prop 13. Their heart may be in it, sometimes not, but their tactics have not been very effective. TV and direct mail only gets a certain number of voters. The most impactful political communication occurs on a one-to-one basis. And this is where the Democrats and the labor unions and the special interests on the left have an edge. They have neighbors telling neighbors, friends telling friends, employers alerting employees, or unions alerting their members. They have a grassroots infrastructure that they've built out cycle after cycle. If we're going to stop the tax increases, we must have a grassroots strategy. And that's where Reform California is going to focus virtually all of its effort in the next several months, organizing a grassroots campaign. There are 4 major parts of that grassroots campaign strategy. First, we're using an online petition to recruit and organize grassroots activists. We did this very successfully in the gas tax repeal. It's how we qualified the initiative over a period of time on a real small budget, is that we went out and we asked people to share an online petition to stop the gas tax. We did digital ads on Facebook and through text messaging. We also did a lot of viral sharing. So we need your help. Share the online petition, stoppropertytaxhikes.com. You go to that browser, stoppropertytaxhikes.com, and share it with all your friends, all your colleagues. They will be asked to sign up on a petition to protect Prop 13 and stop property tax hikes. Why is that important? It is because we are going to be using that petition to build the database, the network of people who are, like us, opposed to property tax increases. And then they will start getting information once a week, an email, letting them know about what's going on the effort to defend Prop 13 and what they can do in their area to help us defend Prop 13. If we don't build this network, we won't be able to get the word out on a bargain basement budget. So this petition is so critical. Tell people to share it and sign up. Stoppropertytaxhikes.com. We use that petition then to organize people in each region. We used to do this through town halls. We did so many town halls during the gas tax repeal, and we even got a bus and we went up and down the state and held these rallies. It's so important that we continue those town halls, but for the foreseeable future, they are going to be virtual town halls, like the one that you're participating in today. We will work with community groups in each part of the state to issue invites and promote attendance. We do digital ads, as we always have, inviting people to these virtual town halls. The goal is to educate attendees that the property tax measure is on the ballot and that they should vote no on it. But it's also designed to identify community activists. So let me be blunt. Each of you are a community activist. Anyone who's willing to sign up for a virtual town hall and spend an hour with Carl DeMaio talking about Prop 13, you're probably more engaged than the typical person in your community. And that's great, because if you show up to one of these virtual town halls, then we are going to lean on you. We're going to activate you in the fall campaign to be a regional or neighborhood leader. This is something that the Democrats and the leftists have done. We got to start doing this more and more on the right if we're going to be able to win these campaigns. Well, during the summer, anyone who shows up at the virtual town halls, we will then activate them, train them, and build them out to be engaged in the fall in their region to get the message out. First, at Reform California, we are going to be doing research on examples of wasteful spending locally. Because remember, the people trying to repeal Prop 13, they're not going to talk about money going to the state. No, they're going to talk about all the money going to local programs, community programs. We already know their strategy. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the tables on them saying, you don't care about the kids, you don't care about filling potholes, because in your agency, you're getting this money already and you're wasting it in the following way. It's so important that we are able to give people examples of obscene levels of waste in their local programs. Don't give these programs more money when they're already wasting the money we already entrust them with. That then leads to local earned media opportunities such as press conferences and rallies to get the word out. And finally, we're going to utilize social media and, if possible, in-person events to expand neighborhood networks of activists and reach voters. We did a lot of the barbecue, ballot, and beer events in my last campaign, and they were very helpful in getting people engaged in a social setting in politics by offering them free beer and free barbecue, and then of course giving them information on what was on the ballot. The final stage of the campaign is actual voter contact, and that's going to occur in the last month, the last 30 days when people have ballots in their hands. We will have neighborhood canvas programs where we give people door hangers, and those door hangers are delivered door to door by the people who attended the virtual town halls. We're going to say, look, can you just walk your neighborhood 30 homes? We'll give them a list of voters that we believe are persuadable in their neighborhood and get them to knock on their door and leave a door hanger with a voter guide. Of course, if we are in normal state by October, we will resume the ballots, the barbecue and beer events in each neighborhood so that we can get people to show up and harvest ballots legally, legal harvesting of ballots. And if not getting the ballots themselves, at least getting voters who will use our voter guide to fill out their ballot. Our goals in the next 6 months, activate 500,000 Californians. And you might say, that's a lot of people. Remember, we were able to qualify the gas tax repeal because we activated 50,000 volunteers early on. That then yielded a grassroots network of about 380,000 activists over that period of time. I think 500,000 is certainly the goal that we should set, because if each of them talk to just 10 people, whether it's door to door, whether it's at their office or their church, it will result in 5,000 personal contacts being made. That is so important because remember, the split roll initiative is going to have a misleading title on the ballot. You know, TV may not get the message across, but having your neighbor tell you, hey, that proposition, you know, whether it's prop, 16, 17, 18, whatever number it gets, prop 16 repeals the prop 13 from 1978. And what we need to make sure we do is defend Prop 13. We don't need a tax increase. We sometimes need to get through the clutter of TV, radio, and direct mail with an individual personal contact. And this program can activate 500,000 people, an average of 10 people they talk to. That's 5 million personal contacts. Some of those will be overlapped, which is fine. But remember, we're only looking at a margin of victory of maybe a couple 100,000 votes when it comes to this initiative and how close it is in the poll. One campaign, many benefits. While we're going to be going after a statewide campaign to protect Prop 13 by defeating the split roll initiative, we will also be activating networks in each region to defeat local tax hikes. Here in San Diego, they have a massive property tax increase that they're putting on the ballot in November, that over the next 5 years will cost the typical homeowner roughly $400 to $500 in increased taxes, just with that one measure. So the local tax increases, we are planning to link the campaigns. The voter guides, the door hangers that we go door to door with will not just talk about the statewide initiative, but it will also talk about local tax measures that we're trying to defeat, as well as endorse reform-minded candidates running for office. So we have one campaign, but it can pay off in multiple ways in terms of benefit by getting reformers elected and, of course, defeating local tax hikes. How can you help? This is a question that many of our activists are always asking, what can we do? Now, you see that picture over there of all those smiling people? They're actually doing a mail-a-thon. What we do is we do handwritten letters to hundreds of thousands of voters who are persuadable. And because handwritten letters are a lot better than TV ads and direct mail pieces that people throw in the trash, the junk mail. The handwritten letter program really breaks through the clutter. And the only way we can do that is if we have volunteers that are writing these letters at their home. Right now, with the coronavirus shutdown, we have hundreds of volunteers taking kits home. We deliver them safely to people's homes. No contact delivery is what we call it. And they're at home, since they're locked down, instead of playing another round of cards or watching another TV show, they're sitting there and actually writing these letters, and we're then taking them back into our campaign headquarters. We've already done nearly 60,000 letters just in the last 3 weeks. And so we do need volunteers. To become a volunteer in your region, just go to reformcalifornia.org/volunteer. We also need you to share that petition I talked about, stoppropertytaxhikes.com. We need to build that out and get as many people who agree that we don't want a property tax hike passed and we want to defend Prop 13. We got to get them connected to the campaign so they're getting that weekly email with the updates. And finally, contribute. We did the gas tax repeal because we had 35,000 donors give an average of $37. Even $25 today, a contribution of just $25 helps us to keep the campaign rolling during this difficult time of the coronavirus. We have to continue to organize because you can't build a grassroots campaign 30 days out of an election. You got to do it this summer. And that's why we literally have 4, 5, 6 weeks to put this regional program together. And your funding of $25 or more really helps us do that. With that, let's entertain any questions you might have. If you are in the Zoom app, just click raise hand and we'll call on you to ask your question. If you're on the phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand. Or if you don't get your question answered or asked and answered, email me at carl@reformcalifornia.org. With that, Dave, why don't we start with the question? I got one from Mary. She says, I'm 68 and live on Social Security. Can't stand more increases in voted indebtedness much longer. What can I do? Well, Mary, this whole campaign is exactly focused on you. Not only is it a tax increase that we're trying to stop, but these local bond measures come with a tax increase. It's always backed with taxpayer funds, typically a property tax assessment. They always call them assessments. It's a tax. And so that's where this, buy one, get 5 free model works, where we're going after the statewide initiative to stop the tax increases, but we are really trying to activate people on multiple measures. And so we will also be opposing bonds through this program on that ballot slate card, the door hanger that I talked about. You're activating someone? Here we go to Edward Collins. You're up next. Edward, just ask your question. We can hear you.
Carl, could you prepare an abbreviated version of this session and send it to everyone on your email list, and then we could send it to every one of our contacts in California?
Yes. Okay, let's go ahead and mute that. I want to share with you our one-pager that we have. It is here. Hopefully we can do this. And a new share. I believe I just shared the one pager. We are doing the mailers I mentioned. These mailers have this insert inside of them. You all see that? The PDF? Yeah. This insert is being put in each of the mailers, and we will send a PDF around to everyone so that you can access this one pager. It shows how much the typical Californian will end up losing in protection, how much Prop 13 has saved them. It will also explain what Reform California is doing on these 4 programs I talked about at the beginning of our town hall. And so that one pager can be shared with you. We'll send that around. Next question. Hey, Jimmy, you want to ask your question, Jimmy A?
Yeah, how's it going, Carl? Hey, so I'm down with everything you said in the plan. Here's my question. Are we going to have enough time to inform our voters after the Attorney General changes the verbiage on the ballot like he did last time?
It's a good question. Jimmy says, are we going to have enough time to inform voters that there's a misleading title on the ballot? Yes. When we did Prop 6, the ballot title changed in August. And when we did our first poll, September 9th, it was not good. It showed that only 22% of Californians were going to vote yes. And more than 60% were going to vote no. And we had no money to do TV ads. We had no money to do radio and direct mail. And so we did everything grassroots. We moved those numbers in 8 weeks from 22% all the way up to 46%. We still fell short. But Jerry Brown and his special interest cabal had to spend $50 million, and they were sweating bullets because we were gaining on them so quickly through the grassroots program. That's why we cannot wait till September or August, late August, to do this program. We need to do this now. We have to take that base of support that we have and grow it statewide, so that when we activate that network of neighbors telling neighbors, colleagues telling colleagues, friends telling friends, that we have 500,000 people, not the 300,000 people we had ultimately with Prop 6. So we believe that advanced preparation is what's going to allow us to have enough people to get the word out quicker. Let's go to who? Cassius. Are you there, Cassius? I'll go to John. I'm going to go to John Alexander. John, you go next. There you go. John, ask your question.
I'm wondering, is there a way that we can stop the Attorney General from changing the verbiage and deceiving voters?
The question is, can we stop the Attorney General from changing the language on a ballot measure? The answer is no. We tried that with Prop 6. The court said, you don't like your title and summary, get yourself a new Attorney General. And so we exhausted all of our legal avenues in that fight. But now we are working, as I mentioned earlier, on an effort to change the title and summary process through the voter initiative process in California, working with a number of coalition groups to do that. I'm thinking that a lot of our larger institutional supporters that are fighting this repeal of Prop 13 finally agree with us that they're going to get screwed if they don't impose some sort of standards of accountability, honesty, and transparency on the ballot measure titles. Now, locally, we can sue, and locally, we can pursue remedies when a local initiative has a faulty or misleading title, because the local initiatives are the subject of county boards, city councils, as well as the county council or city attorneys. So we do have avenues locally to get proper titles and summary. But what we need to do is reform that process statewide. And we have an initiative laid out on our website, reformcalifornia.org, to do that. We're still working on funding, however, to get to that point where we can change that process. I don't see her yet. Oh, there she is, Ann Avery. Hey, Ann, are you there?
Muted myself. I was just wondering, your verbiage here mentions a petition. Where can I get the petition? Question one. Second one, if you don't mind, since you're talking about a lawsuit, do you know about any efforts to initiate a lawsuit against paying all the illegals all that money that Newsom says he wants to pay them?
Good question. So first, the petition is that online petition I mentioned. It's so critical that we get people to sign up online, because this is how we organize. This is how we organize our grassroots effort in California. People say, well, online petitions aren't enforceable. We're not using the online petition to file and qualify a measure. We're using the online petition to organize the grassroots. That's where we are losing elections, is that we do not have a grassroots infrastructure in the state of California, because the Republican Party has allowed it to atrophy. Who has an infrastructure? The left does. Unions, they've got all these billionaire funded groups, George Soros and Tom Steyer. They go door to door. They have petitions on their tablets, on their cell phones, on Facebook. They know that those online petitions are all about organizing activists, and then they activate those people when it comes time to the election. And they go out and they tell their friends and they share things on social media. We've got to do the same. And I think the ability that we showed to use those online petitions to qualify the gas tax repeal underscores why that's such an important strategy. And as it relates to the website you can go to share that petition, it's right here on the slide. StopPropertyTaxHikes.com. Get everyone to sign up. And when they sign up, they then will start getting information on what they can do to be engaged in the campaign. As it relates to Newsom and funding illegal immigrants, with these latest idea he has is to give them $1,000 cash. The best way for us to stop that abuse of taxpayer funds is to cut off the money. So when we go out on the Prop 13 campaign and explain to voters why they should support Prop 13 and keep the limitation on property taxes, we give them examples like the one you just mentioned of abuse and wasteful government spending. And if you say, look, if you're angry about that, don't give Gavin Newsom any more money. If he has enough money to do that crap, he doesn't deserve another dime. And if you think that this money is going to go fill potholes, or if you think this money is going to go to police officers or nurses, no, it's going to go to examples like that. I got Constance. Constance, you want to ask your question?
Yes. Do you know of any loopholes in the proposed tax hike or cut, whatever you want to say, for large corporations? Because in the past, large corporations have figured a way to get out of some of these things.
Okay. Are there loopholes for large corporations? What the politicians and the special interests are going to say is that this initiative forces large corporations to pay their fair share. It forces all of us to pay more. Okay. The little guy always gets stuck with the bill. The big boys always raise prices on it. And so if you want to protect the little guy, tell the politicians no tax increases. That is so important that we not allow them to politicize and use class warfare in this campaign. The big boys are the state politicians and the big government unions that are backing the Prop 13 repeal. And that's why it's important for us to point out who's backing this tax increase: state politicians, the government unions who run the state. You can't say that you're fighting the power when you are the power. You all call the shots. You have a super majority. You can't get more establishment and status quo than government union bosses and California state politicians. Let's go to Sean or Shauna. Is that Shauna? Walk. You go ahead.
John Rockwood. Thanks. My question is, do we have like pins or small buttons that we can wear on our lapel? Or I would love to have things that I can actually wear and maybe give people when I'm out in public, because I sell to the general public. I work for medical sales if I get to go back to work. And I'd like to have something I could wear on my lapel, or definitely signs for the yard, for anything for Reform California, as well as the Proposition 13.
That's a good question. Do we have any signs, buttons, any sort of stickers that we can give out? We're not going to give any of that out until we know what number is on the ballot. Remember, with the gas tax repeal, we had to wait to find out what our number was. And then we had to redo our entire logo. Yes on 6, gas tax repeal. So we have to wait to find out what number will be assigned this initiative, this tax increase. Then we're going to print up a number of items, obviously lawn signs, because even in a coronavirus lockdown, we hope that the lockdowns get lifted tomorrow. But even in an environment where coronavirus may change our ability to interact, we still need lawn signs because people still live in their communities. A lot of social media buttons can be shared. So we're going to provide that digitally to everyone. They can share on their Instagram, their Facebook, and Twitter. But we will also have creative ways for people to share materials. The door hangers, obviously. In Prop 6, we did gas pump stickers. Those were amazing. People were constantly putting them on gas pumps. So yes, we will be printing those materials and distributing them. That's why having people regionally is so important, because we need to be able to ship that material to a person in each community that then can serve as a central location to distribute. Many of you know, if you got yourself a Prop 6 lawn sign, you know that we used a distribution model like Avon to give out those signs. where people ordered a sign and they picked them up from someone in their community, whether it was a store, an office, or even someone's garage. So we will be doing that. Sarah Fisher's up next. Sarah? Hold on, Sarah.
Of the example of the wastage in terms of dollars. So for example, what the original gas tax was, what the current gas tax is doing, and how much they're actually spending on the roads, that information. Something that
Oh, I got you. Okay, so in terms of waste, how can we show where our existing tax money is going? We will be continuing to do that. You know, you mentioned roads and the money that's been stolen from our road repairs. We will continue to take a look at existing gas, or I guess existing taxes, and showcase and expose where that money has been wasted. And so one of the ways that we do that is we show what people are earning, salaries in government, and they find out a librarian's earning, you know, $250,000 a year in pension. And people are like, wait a minute, that's absurd. Why are we raising taxes when that money is being expended? Gavin Newsom just issued a no bid contract to the Chinese government for $1 billion of COVID-19 masks. You know what that works out to? The total order was 200 million masks. That's $5 a mask. They actually cost roughly 4 cents to manufacture in China. And so those are the sorts of examples that we're going to come out with about waste, fraud, and abuse. Why would you ever give more money to politicians that have done this to you? I got a question in the chat room from Richard Fletcher. He says, Carl, why don't you relent somewhat on Prop 13 by agreeing to exempt commercial properties, which should never have been included? Oh, Richard, are you one of those leftists, one of those tax hikers? Do you actually think that we can trust our politicians with more money? Do you actually think it's okay to have the highest gas tax prices, highest gas prices and the highest gas tax in the country, but get no road repairs? Do you think that's good? Because if you agree with all that, then I guess you're willing to support a tax increase. The reality is this: no matter who's paying the tax increase, these state politicians, these local politicians don't deserve another penny of our money. And there's no free lunch, Richard. As soon as anyone is imposed, forced to pay a higher tax, whether they're a gas station or a coffee shop or the dry cleaners or the CPA, they're going to have to increase their prices. There is no free lunch. That's the whole thing. Margaret Thatcher put it right. The problem with socialism is eventually you run out of someone else's money. And so, no, we're not going to allow any more tax increases in California, Richard. If you think that you trust these politicians with more of your money, it's okay. You can write them a check and you can send a check in, and I'm sure they'll find a way to cash it. Nancy Heilbert is next. We have 2 more questions that we'll be able to have time to entertain. Nancy, go ahead. Oh. I unmuted her. Hold on, Nancy. We're trying to unmute you. Did you do it again? I think you and I are canceling each other out. Nancy, we got you unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, so since your campaign office is closed due to COVID-19, how do we get the materials to address the letters?
The campaign can get you materials if you go to this website, reformcalifornia.org/volunteer.
Okay,
And then we will arrange for a no contact drop off at your house. And you
Okay.
can do stuff at your house.
and then how do we get them back to you? Or do
You will
we
get an
tell them?
email, and it will just advise you that when you're done with your box, you can just simply email us, and we will arrange for a date where you will just leave the box outside your door, and then it will be picked up by one of our volunteers.
Okay, and when will this start?
It's already underway. We'd love
Oh,
to have your
good.
help. We've already done 60,000.
Good. And Carol, may I just say, I am so glad to hear you back on radio.
I'm happy to be back on radio too. I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
We got time for one more. Let's go to Lyle. Lyle, go ahead.
Well, Carl,
How are you?
we have some commercial buildings. I'm not sure everybody understands that a lot of commercial buildings operate under what's called triple net, which means all the expenses for the building are paid based on the square footage they occupy. So if they increase the taxes on commercial buildings, they'll go straight to the tenants who are already struggling. So I'm not sure this makes any sense to them. I think we should make sure we talk to all the tenants that are under this operation, so they will be aware that this is going to come directly to them.
I think I made out most of what you said. So Lyle owns some commercial buildings and they operate in their contract, their rental contract, when you sign a lease agreement for that space under something called triple net. Some contracts use different ways of calculating rent, but that's one popular way, common way that people are assessed rent for their unit. A property tax increase under that contract immediately gets passed on to that tenant. It doesn't get paid for by the property owner. It gets paid for by the tenants. Those tenants could be a hair salon. It could be a CPA. It could be a psychologist, a counselor, a piano teacher. Those tenants will then be forced with yet another increased cost of operating. And we're talking about an environment where the economy is already on the ropes with the coronavirus. Why would we want to do that, particularly during this environment? And so we will be out there explaining those financial realities. And I think Lyle's right. There will be a lot of Democrat professionals that will help us with this campaign because they're going to end up paying for the cost of the increased tax. All right, so here's your assignments. Number one, if you have any other questions, just email me, carl@reformcalifornia.org. We will respond to your emails as quickly as we can get them responded to. Second, please share the online petition, stoppropertytaxhikes.com. We got to get as many people in your network of friends and family and colleagues to be activated and connected to the campaign. Third, if you can volunteer, sign up at reformcalifornia.org/volunteer. And finally, please consider a contribution of any amount. $25 is all it takes. If you can give more, please do that. And that's at reformcalifornia.org, or at the end of this presentation, you will be taken to a donation page if you are so inclined. With that, thank you for joining us, and share the petition, and we'll continue to keep you engaged as to the next steps. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.